It was dark at night. Song Changjing returned to the governor's office alone. Young Song Jigson had gone to the mud bottle laying like a dog's kennel. The man didn't insist on a doubt as a senior general of the army for many years. He could snore loudly in the blood sea of Corpse Mountain. Therefore, the nephew who was released didn't live so well as a noble in the sky these years. Song Changjing didn't think he owed the child. It would be nice to return to Dali capital alive. The old steward of the Yamen office has been waiting at the door. Holding a lantern in his hand, Song Changjing took the lead in crossing the threshold with only one side door open, strode forward and said, "Don't lead the way." The old steward nodded silently, slowed down, and then left quietly. The government office on Fulu Street is not extravagantly built, and its land area is far less than that of the house surnamed Lun and Li. The former Rio Kill supervisor lived a hard life, and the big families in the town didn't feel anything wrong. However, Song Changjing is different. Today, the same mother and brother of Dali Emperor has made great achievements in opening up the territory and expanding the territory. He is also one of the top martial arts masters in Dongbao Pingshu. His arrival is like crossing the river and breaking into a small lake. Even if the local snakes are not afraid, no one will show their disrespectful posture in the face of people like Song Changjing. When Song Changjing passed the small courtyard, he saw that someone was still reading in the room at night, sitting upright and meticulous when he was alone. He deserves to be a gentleman. Song Changjing's big sleeves fluttered and walked quickly, with sarcasm on his lips. Died in the past. A young man studied in Guanhou Academy. His calligraphy was divine and famous. He was called into the imperial palace by the lord of the Southern Wei dynasty and wrote an imperial edict in the side hall. It was snowing in the middle of winter and his pen was frozen. The emperor ordered more than 10 palace concubines to serve on his left and right sides and write for him. This matter quickly swept Dongbao Pingshu and was said to be a beautiful talk. But no one thought deeply about how strict the imperial palace was. How did the people know that the emperor didn't say it? The eunuch didn't say it, and the concubines didn't say it. Walking on the deep path, Song Changjing suddenly left heartily. Dressed in plain clothes, Song Jigson returned to the mud bottle lane. The courtyard door was unlocked. When he opened the door, he saw his maid Zhigui sitting on a chair in the main hall, half squinting and nodding with her head tilted. When her head tilted to a certain extent, she immediately sat upright and continued to tilt down. It seems that the girl is really tired. Song Jigson bent down, gently shook her shoulder and said softly, "Zhigui, Zhigui, wake up and go back to his room to sleep. Don't be careful of the cold." The sleepy girl rubbed her eyes and said vaguely, "Child, why did you come back so late?" Song Jigson said with a smile, "I went to the corridor bridge, thought it's a little far away. So it's late." Zhigui saw Song Jigson's strange dress and said in surprise, "Hey, how did you change your clothes?" Song Jigson didn't want to talk more about this topic. "Don't mention this. How about reading and literacy after lending you the local county chronicle? Do you want me to teach you?" The girl shook her head and said, "No." Song Jigson returned to his room. Thought it was dark. He took off his robe, kicked off his boots, and touched the bed. The boy whispered, Wang Zhu. I see." Zhigui returned to her room, turned off the light, and went to bed. The whole person shrank into the quilt and made a slight movement, like stealing food and chewing something in her mouth. Finally, she burped. Although Liu Xianxia has not officially become Master Ruan's apprentice in the sword casting shop, everyone can see that Master Ruan attaches great importance to this tall young man. Otherwise, he will not personally teach him how to forge sword strips. Not everyone can enter the row of sword casting rooms now. During the noon break, a young man from a porcelain till worker came to Liu Xianxia and said that someone was looking for him. He winked and thought about it very much. He said that he was a beautiful woman who was better looking than the ladies in Fulu Street. Liu Xianxia followed him with a playful smile. In fact, his heart suddenly became heavy. Sure enough, next to a well, stood a slender woman, surrounded by many young men digging wells and moving soil, working very hard. As the little master despises the Songji salary, Liu Xianxia is indeed a woodlouse. But whether the woman is good-looking or not, she has no right to worry. and has nothing to do with it. Maybe the tall boy doesn't know. Generally speaking, there is a kind of charm, especially dignified and charming, which is particularly so stirring that if the word MEI is interpreted, it means the daughter of the thrush. In front of her, the lady with a known name and roots has fine eyebrows, like the whiskers of insects, and her full head is like a cicada, wide and square, smooth and plump. Today, she came here alone. She didn't have the posture of asking questions, nor did she want to bully others. Liu Xianxia was a little relieved. However, Liu Xianxia doesn't deny that this elegant lady has a beautiful face. If she met in the street in the past, she might whistle a few times. But this doesn't mean that Liu Xianxia will be moved. The woman whom the tall young man liked was the maid of that mud bottle lane. Now and in the future, Liu Xianxia took the beautiful woman to the stream and said firmly, "Madam, if you want to persuade me to sell you that heirloom, I advise Madam not to open this mouth." The woman smiled and said, "Don't rush to refuse. Let me tell you what's at stake before you make a decision." The tall boy's face remained unchanged and pretended to be relaxed. In fact, a heart instantly sank to the bottom of the valley. In the distance, the girl squatted on the threshold of a sword-casting room, carrying a bowl of rice. The white rice piled up like a sharp mountain and towered over the edge of the big white bowl dot. She was wolfing down and eating the mountain top. Later, when she saw the braised meat hidden by her, the whole person was filled with the glory of happiness. He turned his back secretly, turned his back to the man sitting at the other end of the threshold, and asked, "Dad, regardless of the foreign mother-in-law and aunt?" The man said, "No matter." The girl in blue said anxiously, "He is your big disciple here in the future, so he is not afraid to take a fork in the road." The man said calmly, "That's the boy's bad luck." The girl wondered, "Dad, won't you feel pity?" For example, when she saw those delicious and exquisite cakes in the shop, she had no money in her pocket. She had money and bought them. When she accidentally fell to the ground, she really deserved to be hit by 5 thunders. The man answered, "Is the braised meat delicious?" The girl nodded happily subconsciously. "Delicious." The girl suddenly tightened her body. Thought her father had a will. She could only eat one meat dish every day, so she pretended to hold only a bowl of white rice and hide the braised meat in it, so that she could eat a meat dish openly at night. The girl turned her head awkwardly, raised the white bowl high, and said confidently, "There's only one piece, and I don't have bad rules." The man smiled and asked, "Would it be a pity if he couldn't eat the braised meat hidden at the bottom of the bowl?" The girl opened her mouth slightly, and the whole person was as if she had been struck by thunder. The man also sprinkled salt on his daughter's wound. "If you don't ask Liu Xianxia more, Dad will turn a blind eye." The girl was silent and ate braised meat. At a glance, she knew that she would be diligent and thrifty in the future. After dinner, the man looked at the women and teenagers on the other side of the stream and said, "As long as this boy doesn't climb the middle 5 territory in a day, his father won't care about his life or death. Even if he enters the middle 5 territory, his father will manage it once or twice. But he won't care much. It's no more than 3 things. There's no way for good or bad. How people call themselves." The girl said angrily, "Why don't you care?" The man didn't have a good attitude. Scholars and martial arts disciples are no Jiang gang soliciting minions. They don't want to quarrel with people in the future and fight with people by relying on a large number of people. In the final analysis, in my eyes, teachers and students, teachers and disciples are the same people. Besides, Liu Xianxia is not my disciple now. The girl didn't speak. The man sighed. "Silly girl. Do you know how many people there are in this isolated Dali dynasty? More than 20 million households. Can you manage so many people and so many troubles? Dad will take over the town from Xianxia in the next 60 years. Don't wander around all day. Be safe to forge swords and practice swords here. Otherwise, Dad will manage or ignore trouble." Before the man finished speaking, the girl said, "Don't worry." Her words almost hurt the man. The power is no weaker than that of a sword fairy. The man really wants to knock the silly girl's head hard. Can Dad ignore your business? Men are a little sad. The girl looked shocked and said, "Hey, Why is there an extra piece of braised meat at the bottom of the bowl? Alas, I've run out of share today. I'd better give it to you, Dad. Men don't have to turn around to see. They can feel the stupid girl's poor acting skills. They have no choice but to say, forget it. You'll eat it. Dad will treat you as if you only ate a piece of braised meat today. Remember to make iron in the afternoon and don't be lazy. The girl's gratitude was no false. Dad, it's very kind of you. The man smiled angrily and said, it's braised meat. Okay. The girl lowered her head, took a bite of rice and whispered, That is fine. The man put on his face and managed to hold back his smile. After thinking about it, he thought it was better to have a daughter. A voice suddenly sounded in my ear. Dad, could I have another piece at night? 2 and 3 pieces are not much different, right? Dad, if you don't speak, I'll promise. The girl ran away with lightning speed. The last sentence was said only after the girl had run far away. The man rubbed his cheek and said to himself, Food is the most important thing in my family. After delivering the letter, Chen Ping bought a breakfast and sent it to Miss Ning in the mud bottle lane, and then began to cook the medicine skillfully. Ning Yao is wearing a brand new dark green robe today, though she is clean and tidy. She is already full of heroism. This dress, with a long knife on her waist, is more noble than the rich children in Taoai Lane. Fulu Street. Ning Yao hesitated. At present, if you really want to study the mountain shaking manual, you have to do 3 things before you learn boxing: standing, walking, and sleeping. The last thing is to pay more attention to the accumulation of orifices and points and the circulation of breath. It's difficult to describe it in words. Don't say it first, anyway. The first 2 things don't need to think too much about talent and points. You honestly follow the posture drawn on the manual. It's useful to stick to it for a long time. Even if you can't get into the martial arts, it's not impossible to be strong and prolong life. Chen Ping said one of his thoughts. Is it okay to practice walking piles in the stream? Ning Yao nodded and said, Of course. Practice on your knees, then your waist, and finally your neck. Chen Ping asked along with her words, Isn't the whole person in the water in the end? Ning Yao sneered. Why? Do you want to practice holding your breath under the water and then practice a Millennium King 80,000-year turtle? Chen Ping did not speak bitterly. Ning Yao thought, Come on, let me show you how to walk the pile. Look carefully. Ning Yao asked Chen Ping to move the table away, and then walk forward 6 steps. 3 small and 3 large in the last step. When she stepped down heavily, the mud of the whole house seemed to give a dull vibration. The girl finished at 1 go. It seems to be an understatement, but in fact, it gives the straw sandal boy a feeling of indescribable and unclear. It's like a waterfall falling down, which is natural and contains great strength. It's also like the lead spinning in the stream, turning round and smoothly. Very gentle. Everything is right. But Chen Ping just knows it and doesn't know why. Seeing the boy's vacant look, Ning Yao withdrew to his original position and demonstrated it again. Ning Yao stood still, turned his head and asked, Do you understand? Let's have a try. Chen Ping took a deep breath and tried again. Staggering, like a drunken drunkard, Chen Ping stood in place and scratched his head. Obviously, he himself felt a little outrageous. Ning Yao, with a black face, said in a deep voice, Come again. After 3 times, Chen Ping has improved slightly. When Ning Yao's face is as gloomy as a rainstorm, she can't imagine how there could be such a fool as Chen Ping, who has no savvy in practicing martial arts and bad talent. No way. Ning Yao is a person who has stood at the top of kendo since he was a child. He has such background, bone, talent and vision. So the girl simply couldn't understand how those people climbed the mountain step by step at the foot of the mountain thousands of miles away from her, and why they stumbled. Finally, the girl had no choice. She was afraid that if she couldn't help herself, she would draw a knife to cut someone. So she had an idea, patted the straw sandal boy on the shoulder and reluctantly comforted him. Chen Ping, reading 100 times is the same as practicing martial arts. If you practice boxing tens of thousands of times and can't get the taste, it's hundreds of thousands or a million. Go and pick up your stones. Stupid birds fly first, then lose heart. Take your time and practice this walking path again and again in the stream. Chen Ping'an thought, that's really the truth. I heard Song Jigsan say a word before, which has the same meaning as Miss Ning's reading 100 times. It calls reading 10,000 volumes and writing like God. However, the teenager thinks it's more reasonable. What Miss Ning said is not enough. Then practice 1,000,000 times. Chen Ping'an ran out of the mud bottle lane with a smile, recited 3 small and 3 big ones all the way, and imitated Ning Yao's walking posture according to his memory. The truth that the straw sandal boy tells himself in his heart is that after practicing 1,000,000 times, he may be able to practice boxing. Therefore, the first practice of the Shaking Mountain manual started 1,000,000 times. After that, Chen Ping'an was qualified to talk about other things. Ning Yao sat alone on the threshold and said to himself, why do you feel like you've dug a big hole? Can't that guy climb out? There are more and more strangers in the town, and the business of inn and restaurant is booming. At the same time, on the other side of Fulu Street and Tawai Lane, many young children of this generation of high-ranking families began to leave the town quietly. Most of them were intelligent and handsome young people who had made illy hair. There were also concubines of unknown origin or loyal family children, including the son of a noble family. Zhao Yu. As for the child Guken in the mud bottle lane, Liu Shimao, who was intercepted by the river, was an exception. Chen Ping'an went to Liu Xianxia's house to get baskets and fish baskets and left the town to go to the stream. When there were many people, Chen Ping'an certainly wouldn't practice shaking the mountain spectrum. When he left the town, there was no one around. Chen Ping'an began to recite the formula silently. He recalled Miss Ning's steps, posture, and momentum when she walked the pile. He didn't want to miss every detail and walked out of those 6 steps again and again. At that time, when Chen Ping'an first imitated Ning Yao in the mud bottle lane, he was so clumsy and funny that he was worse than ordinary people. In fact, there was a misunderstanding about the cognition of young girls. Chen Ping'an always knew that he had a problem. From the beginning of porcelain kiln workers, he found that he had eye diseases, but his hands were slow. To be exact, it was because the young people's eyes and eyesight were too bright. As a result, the hands and feet can't keep up at all, which means that if someone else imitates Ning Yao's walking pile, it may be 3 or 4 points similar and rough and poor for the first time, but at least it's not as similar as Chen Ping'an. This is precisely because Chen Ping'an sees it too clearly and truly, and is too harsh for each link. It's still too much. After his hands and feet can't keep up, it becomes particularly ridiculous. And under the 9 points, there is a valuable divine resemblance. These Ning Yao didn't know that even if they were 9 points similar in shape, they couldn't compare with 1 point similar in spirit. Of course, if you want to come back, don't say that she is only like Ning Yao. Even if she has 7 or 8 points, Ning Yao wouldn't feel how amazing. In Ning Yao's eyes and eyes, only the far distance of martial arts. The people standing side by side in the top of one of the few candles. Chen Ping'an sat on the steps under the plank of the corridor bridge to rest. The teenager roughly calculated that he would walk the pile repeatedly for about 300 times. 100,000 a year or 1,000,000 times in 10 years. 12 hours a day. Even if he insisted on 5 to 6 hours a day. The straw sandal boy turned his head and looked at the clear stream. Whispered, let me stick to it for 10 years. Should it be okay? Although Chen Ping'an did not show any strange emotions during these days, the secret revealed by Taoist Lu before his departure broke the sinister means of Xianxia in Xianxia Mountain one by one, which still made the teenager feel heavy. One thing Chen Ping'an did mention to both Taoist Lu and Miss Ning was that after Xianxia poked his eyebrows and patted his heart, the boy had vaguely felt something wrong with his body in the mud bottle alley. That's why he stayed at the gate of his yard for so long to make up his mind to break the jar. Also want to fight with Xianxia. After all, Chen Ping'an at that time, according to the young Taoist Lu Shen, was still lifeless. He didn't look like a young man who should have been full of vitality. Chen Ping'an thought less about life and death than most people at that time. Xianxia used martial means to guide the straw sandal boy to forcibly open his mind. So that Chen Ping'an's body is like a house without a gate. It could indeed move in and absorb more objects. However, in windy, snowy, and rainy weather, the house will collapse very badly and quickly. That's why Lu Chen asserted that if there were no exceptions and no serious diseases and disasters, Chen Ping'an could only live to the age of 30 or 40. After that, she took a pat on Chen Ping'an's heart, which broke his practice foundation. Her heart was the important pass for practitioners. After the city gate collapsed, Xianxia almost sealed the normal operation of the pass, which not only cut off Chen Ping'an's practice avenue, but also accelerated the decay of Chen Ping'an's body. Xianxia has the skills in succession. What's really terrible is that after the door is opened, on the one hand, Chen Ping'an has been unable to practice the method of longevity, which means that he can't make up for the door with his magic powers and can cultivate his foundation and strengthen his yuan. On the other hand, even if a teenager is lucky enough to enter the martial arts school, he can really rely on physical training to strengthen his body. But for Chen Ping'an, great risks will always be accompanied by opportunities. If you are careless, you will fall into the strange circle of practicing, for boxing is easy to attract evil, which is the poor end of no prolonging life, but dying early. It is urgent for Chen Ping'an to have a martial art that can nourish vitality with a long stream of water. It doesn't matter whether the martial arts moves are fierce and overbearing, or whether it makes the realm of human martial arts thousands of miles with each passing day. Chen Ping'an's hopes and all in the mountain-shaking manual that Ning Yao despises. For example, she said that after working the pile, there are still standing piles so furnace, and sleeping piles for thousands of years, but Chen Ping'an didn't dare to practice indiscriminately. At that time, he just glanced at it and couldn't help looking. He felt that Miss Ning should be identified, confirmed, and then began to practice. As long as you are on the right path, no matter how poor your understanding is, as long as you are diligent and tough enough, you are making progress every day. If you go in the wrong direction, the smarter and harder you work, you will only do more and make more mistakes. These words were said by Liu Xianxia. Of course, his focus is on the last sentence. Yu Chen Ping'an is the first kind of person, and the clever ghost of Master Song is the second kind. Only Liu Xianxia is the kind of real genius who is smart and on the right path. At that time, when Liu Xianxia boasted, he was overheard by an old man Yao passing by. The old man, who always gave Liu Xianxia green eyes and regarded him as a proud disciple, did not know which words of the young man poked the old man's sadness. For the first time, old man Yao became angry and chased Liu Xianxia anyway. After that, Liu Xianxia never said the word genius. Chen Ping'an exhaled heavily, stood up, walked up the high steps, and entered the corridor of the corridor bridge. Only then did he find that a group of people, 4 or 5 people, stood in the distance, as if guarding one of the women. Chen Ping'an only saw the woman's side. She sat on the railing of the corridor bridge, her feet hanging naturally on the water surface of the stream, and closed her eyes. Her 5 fingers in both hands are in an odd posture, with her fingers twining or bending. Chen Ping'an feels that she is clearly closing her eyes, but it seems that she is looking at something with her heart. Chen Ping'an hesitated for a moment, stopped moving forward, turned and walked down the steps to wade across the river and find Liu Xianxia. Today, he carried 2 baskets, one large and one small, to return the smaller basket to Master Ruan's blacksmith shop. After all, it was borrowed by Liu Xianyang in the distance of the corridor bridge. The group of people looked at each other and smiled, but did not speak, for fear of breaking the mysterious water-view state of mind of the same-year woman. There is no doubt that this law originates from Buddhism, but later, it was adopted, selected, integrated, and refined by many spiritual sects, and many paths were divided on the last road. However, Dongbao Pingshu has always been regarded as the place of the end of Buddhism. After several annihilation disasters affecting the territory of half a continent, the Buddha Dharma has gradually declined for nearly 1,000 years, and its momentum is far less powerful than that of Confucianism and Taoism among the 3 religions. Only hearing about the true monarch and heavenly master, but not knowing the Dharma protector and great virtue, is the real situation of Dongbao Pingshu today. However, there are indeed countless immortal families that benefit from Buddhism. Chen Ping'an rolled up his trousers and waded across the water. On the other side, he suddenly heard a cry of surprise and anger from the corridor bridge. After thinking about it, he didn't get involved. When he arrived at Master Ruan's blacksmith shop, it was still a hot scene. Chen Ping'an didn't wander around casually. He stood next to a water well and asked someone to help inform Liu Xianxia. Originally thought it would be a long time. I didn't think Liu Xianxia would come soon. He took him to the riverside, lowered his voice, and said, "I've been waiting for you for a long time. How can I come?" Chen Ping'an wondered. "Master Ruan urged you to return the basket." The tall young man said, "What is a broken basket worth? I have something important to tell you. After you pick up the stones and go back to my yard, wait for the lady to find you. That is, the woman whose son is dressed in red. The last time we saw the mother and son at the entrance of the mud bottle alley. Don't say anything. Just give her the big box and she will give you a bag of money. You remember to count 25 copper coins face to face. Well, you can't lose one." Chen Ping'an was shocked and said, "Liu Xianxia, are you crazy? Why do you want the seller to be an outsider?" Liu Xianxia put his arms around the neck of the straw sandal boy, glared and told him, "You know of art, a great future is in front of me. Why did you miss it in vain?" Chen Ping'an was full of doubt and did not believe that this was Liu Xianxia's original intention. Liu Xianxia sighed and whispered, "The lady wants to buy my ancestral armor, and the master and servant want the sword sutra. My grandfather told me before he died that when there is no way the armor can be sold, of course not at a low price. But even if the sword sutra is dead, it can never be admitted in our Lan Liu's house. I promised to sell the armor to the lady. In addition to negotiating the price, I also asked for it. She promised the condition. After she got the treasure armor, she had to convince the big old man not to trouble me in the near future. Thought it was just a delaying formula. When I became Master Ruan's apprentice, these things would not be a thing." Chen Ping'an asked bluntly, "Why don't you drag the lady? Can she still come to the blacksmith shop to trouble you? Besides, she can't break into the door and take your treasure armor." Liu Xianxia loosened his hand, squatted by the stream, touched the stone, and threw it into the stream. He said, "Anyway, Beojia can be sold, now that there is a fair price. It's also good that it can make things more secure. Maybe you don't have to take risks with Miss Ning. So I don't think it's bad." Chen Ping'an also squatted down and urged, "How do you know that the price she is giving is very fair? What if you regret it in the future?" The tall boy turned his head and said with a grin, "Regret? Think about it, Dot. When did I Liu Xianxia regret after we have known each other for so many years?" Chen Ping'an scratched his head and always felt that something was wrong. But the young man was clumsy and didn't know how to convince Liu Xianxia. Liu Xianxia has always lived freely in his life. It seems that he has never been difficult for him. He has never been unable to solve his hard knot and accomplish anything. Liu Xianxia stood up and kicked the basket behind the straw sandal boy. "Hurry up! I'll take it back to Master Ruan. When I return to the school, you can have a long experience." Chen Ping'an slowly. When Chen Ping'an handed him the basket, he asked tentatively, "Don't think about it anymore." Liu Xianxia took the basket, stepped back a few steps, jumped up high without warning, and gave a fancy roundabout kick. After landing calmly, Liu Xianxia was elated and asked with a smile, "Isn't that powerful? Are you afraid?" Chen Ping'an replied angrily, "To your uncle." After he was far away from the ruined shop, Chen Ping'an, who had a lot of thoughts, went into the water to pick up stones. I don't know why he was restless, thought it's still related to the decline of the stream. Today's harvest was no big. Until Chen Ping'an was close to the corridor bridge, he only picked up more than 20 snake goldstones, and none of them could brighten people's eyes and fall in love at first sight. Chen Ping'an took off the baskets, put them in the grass by the stream, took a deep breath, turned around in the stream, and began to practice walking piles. After a trip back and forth, Chen Ping'an was worried. He saw a small boy squatting in the place where the baskets were hidden, with a green hairy dogtail grass in his mouth. She is the grandson of mother-in-law Ma in Xinhua Lane. She has been regarded as a fool since childhood. In addition, mother-in-law Ma has a bad impression in the hearts of Chen Ping'an's generation. Her precious grandson is regarded as a venge. Every time a teenager goes out, he is chased and bullied by others. Every time he wears new clothes and boots, he is sure to be bullied by his peers or older teenagers within half an hour, tossing all over the dust. Imagine a pair of brand new boots that mother-in-law Ma just bought from the shop. After her grandson wore them out, he was trampled on by more than a dozen people. After the children came home, where can the boots go? This silly boy, whose real name is Ma Xian, has long been forgotten, has always been very strange. He was bullied, but he never took the initiative to complain to his mother-in-law, nor did he cry or beg for mercy. He always has a very plain face and cold eyes. Therefore, the children in Xinhua Lane don't like to play with this little fool. Ma Xian learned to play with his own very early. He likes to watch the clouds in the sky on the earth slope or roof. Chen Ping'an never bullied Ma Xian, never had compassion on his peers, and never thought of two guys who sympathize with each other and try to keep warm together. Because Chen Ping'an always thinks that Ma Xian is not stupid. On the contrary, he is very similar to Song Jian. Even worse, they didn't seem to speak, but they seemed to be waiting. They seemed to be talking to people silently. God owed me a lot of things. I'll get them all back sooner or later. You owe me a copper coin. Song Jian may want God to return 1 or 2 silver, Ma Xian, or even 1 or 2 gold. Chen Ping'an didn't think they were so bad, but he didn't like it. The young man was no longer like the fool before. He spoke clearly and asked with a smile, "Are you Chen Ping'an of Mad Bottle Lane, living next door to Jigui?" Chen Ping'an nodded. "What's up?" The boy smiled, pointed to Chen Ping'an's basket and reminded, "Maybe you haven't noticed that the stream water has dropped a lot. There are only 2 good stones. The deep pool under the corridor bridge and the puddle on the back of Qing'an are you thought other places can't. Just like those in your basket. They can't keep the air. The stone quality will change soon. Some are lucky enough to make a good sharpening stone. Some can become an ink stone for scholars. And finally these things win. However, it's still a good thing. It's certainly not difficult to sell at a high price, forget it. You may not understand it." Chen Ping'an smiled and said nothing more. The little boy suddenly said, "Did you just practice boxing in the stream?" Chen Ping'an still didn't speak. Ma Xian's eyes were shining, and he said with a smile, "So you're not stupid. You're right. You're like me. You're a passerby." Chen Ping'an bypassed the boy and said, "I'll go first, then pick up the basket and go ashore." The boy squatted in the distance, spit out the chewed dog-tail grass in his mouth, shook his head and whispered, "Fist fight can work. There are many mistakes, and no matter how much practice, he can't practice flower heads." Ma Xian didn't turn his head. "Have you taken back a military keepsake?" Behind him, a man smiled and said, "Remember to call master first." The boy didn't answer. After getting up, he turned his head and asked, "Can you show me the small sword tomb?" It is the strategist master who carries the sword and hanged the tiger amulet. He claims to be from Shenwu Mountain. He once threatened to fight the little martial uncle of the Golden Boy and Girl School. The man shook his head and said, "It's not hard yet." Then he was a little angry. "Why do you deliberately break the woman's water-view state of mind? Do you know this kind of thing, once done, it will be the enemy of life and death for a lifetime?" The young man looked indifferent and said, "The road is hard. If you can't even stand this ordeal, how dare you expect to live a long life without worry?" The man smiled angrily and said, "You dare to speak loudly before you even enter the door. You're not afraid to flash your tongue." Finally, the young man grinned, showed his white teeth, and said with a smile, "When I encounter this opportunity on the way to practice, I will take the initiative to tell the woman that you are not allowed to interfere, master, and let her do me a good deed." The man said with emotion, "Do you know the size of the opportunity in the world, the thickness of fortune, and the height of roots and bones? If you measure everyone with your own reason, one day you will meet people with bigger fists, deeper cultivation, and higher realm. When people are in a bad mood, they will break your longevity bridge with a fist. How can you deal with yourself? The boy smiled and said, Then I'll accept my life. The man laughed at himself and said, I won't reason with you anymore as a teacher. I'll cast pearls before swine. The boy suddenly asked, How does that guy in the mud bottle lane know the beauty of stones in the water? He has begun to practice boxing. The man suddenly looked stern. Makak Swan. As a teacher, no matter what your rebellious character is, you must keep in mind that our military family is the master of sword cultivation. Cultivating a sword breaks all the laws, obeys your heart, and seeks invincibility with one sword. But you must not kill innocent people indiscriminately, bully laymen, and even more not being candle in the future. Because you are jealous of others, you will deliberately treat people in the same way. The boy stretched his waist. Master, you think too much. Even if the guy in the mud bottle lane is powerful, it has nothing to do with me as long as he doesn't provoke me. In the final analysis, no matter how high the achievements of these people in the town are, they will be nothing more than a stepping stone for me in the future. Jealousy. It's too late for me to thank them. The man said helplessly. It doesn't make sense. I guess I won't stop in the future. The boy asked curiously, What's your ranking in Xianxia Mountain? The man smiled. If you don't say this, it will hurt your face. The young man said with wide eyes. I knew I'd come back later. The man left it off. He didn't tell his apprentice that there were many kinds of talents in the world, and so are talents. The former straw sandal boy, seemingly ordinary six-step walking pile, actually walked with boxing all over his body.